Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee meeting of the City of Winston-Salem. I would have the city clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Mundy.
Present.
Councilmember Scipio.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Here. As you know, we do our agendas in two parts. We have consent and general agenda, and we're going to take the consent agenda first. And I've asked the committee members as well as council members if there are any items that they wanted to have pulled. We do have C5 from Councilmember Scipio, and I also would like, and City Attorney, tell me if I can do this. I want to go ahead and let Ms. Richmond do the housing piece. Can I do that, or do I vote on all of them except the housing pieces?
When you say the housing piece, are you referring to the C5 that was pulled? Just have them vote on the balance except for the ones that have been pulled.
Madam Chair.
All right. And what?
4, 5, and 6.
I'm going to pull C5.
Okay, but these others are the same demolitions.
I think there are others that need to be pulled.
That,
There may be others that need to be pulled.
And
that's on your list.
Madam Chair.
Councilmember
I
Clark.
was going to pull, you already got C5, C6, 7, and 8. That will get all the housing.
Thank you.
Care of them all.
And I'll make a motion on the balance.
May I have a second?
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded to approve the balance of the consent agenda. Let us vote. And it's approved. We will now have the community development or housing. Ms. Richmond.
Item C5, Leroy Gilchrist, heirs 1310 Golson Avenue.
And we're going to make this not quick, but expeditious.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem,
Good afternoon.
members of the council. I'm Sharon Richmond. I'm the Deputy Director of Community Development, and item C5 is going to be explained by Ms. Tiffany Harris of our Community Development Office.
She must be new.
Are you new?
No, I've been here.
Okay. Can we have your name again, please?
Tiffany Harris with Community Development.
Thank you. I think it's the first time I've seen you here, right?
Yes.
All right, you're new. Go ahead.
You're on TV.
I'm Leroy Gilchrist, heirs 1310 Golson Avenue. A due process notifications of the property violations were sent to the owner required by ordinance. Minimum housing violations are 12. List pendants was filed and submitted with the clerk of court on April 12th of 2022. The hearing was held on March 28th, 2022. The repair demolish order expired on April 9th, 2022. The property became eligible for consideration on June 9th, 2022. The estimated cost to repair the structure is $7,415. The tax value of the structure is $10,800.
Thank you. Councilmember Scipio.
This is not just about, my questions aren't just about this property. My questions really about our internal processes. So first of all, how does a property get on the list? Who puts it on the demolition list?
When the properties reach the 6-month vacancy or when the 65% order expires, they become on a research demo list. And we pull some of the worst cases to go first to come to committee.
How does it first get to our attention?
To your attention, when we
To your department's attention?
usually it's a complaint by a citizen or an inspector may notice a property, and we'll cite it from there.
Okay, so mostly it comes from citizens or the code inspectors going around?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just asking these just for the process, for the public to know, because we have a lot of demolition things, and sometimes they're curious as to how this happens. And how is the repair value determined? Is that from a home inspector, an appraiser, or a contractor? How do we come up with what the value is for the repair?
The fair market value comes from the real estate office. We go out with that, the director of that department to take a look at each of the properties. And if
So-
we're not able to go out at that time, we'll take the tax value.
I mean, I said the repair that needs.
Oh, the cost estimate?
the cost.
On the cost estimate, our code officers, they have a template that they use to come up with the amount of the repairs.
So are they licensed inspectors or just from familiarity?
They are our
That's all right.
code
You're
officers.
new.
I got you. Ms. Richmond. You doing good, but it don't hurt for some of us to help. I mean, I understand all this. Councilmember Clark, McIntosh, some of us has been on the council a while, and I've been on community development for 13 years since I got on the council. One of also the suggestions I'd like to make, Ms. Newman, Ms. Richmond, start to prepare a virtual education piece that we can put up on our platforms and even on 13 as to simple things like this, as to how these houses get to us. They don't just drop in our lap. First of all, usually we got neighborhoods that call and complain to their council members and complain to your office, and then the inspectors or code inspectors go out, and then they document the complaint, they walk around, they use the process or the policies and procedures that we use, and then the determination is made. But I'm gonna let you take over, Ms. Richmond.
Thank you. We actually have a slide, or had a slide prepared that we didn't bring tonight because we didn't expect, I'm sorry, Councilmember Scipio, I knew you had asked that question to me before, but we didn't expect it for this presentation on C5. So we can gladly bring that to you and send it to all of you at another time or at
Before
the next
council.
meeting, full council.
Before meeting, Monday.
Absolutely. We can have that prepared for you because we actually already do.
Councilmember Larson,
I have one more question.
Councilmember Scipio.
This is, the crux of all of this is, this house is condemned, the value for the repairs is $7,000, and the value of the house is $10,000. That's not a whole lot of money. Do we work with the homeowners to try to see if they can use any of our rehab funds to get this repaired?
Well, what Ms. Harris was going to proceed to explain with this particular case is Ms. Gilchrist has already contacted our office, and she has specifically talked to Ms. Harris, and she wants an extra 90 days because she is prepared to continue work on this property, and she's asking for 90 days. And that's what she called and talked to you actually this morning, and she's talked to Ms. Harris a couple of other times, and that's what Ms. Harris was going to continue to explain. This house has been in disrepair since 2018, and there has been port problems, as we know, and there's been problems with getting items for vehicles as well as housing, repairs for housing, and it can be anything from parts for housing in terms of mechanical equipment and other things. And so that's what Ms. Harris was going to explain. But we do and have had responses for this property, and she called as recent as today, and actually asked that she be allowed to have 90 days for this particular property.
But would she be eligible for any of our rehab funds that we have? We have programs with,
If she was living in the house,
okay.
perhaps, but all of the properties that we bring to council are vacant.
I got
So none of those properties are eligible because all of the houses that we bring are vacant properties. So none of them are eligible because they're vacant.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
that's what we put into that history report that you all have.
And again, can you kind of step up information for the council to understand how we do this so that they can understand? Again, they haven't been on this as long as I have or some of the rest. that we do have a great system and a great process. Over the years, we've tweaked some things to make it better. We don't have as many properties coming to us as we used to. There used to be a backlog of about 1,000, Marla, or something, Lee.
When I came here, it was over 700
Right.
cases that I came in. It was my present, I guess, for coming.
And we had, and we had to go through those. We had special committee meetings and council meetings to glean through that. But again, could you guys prepare a cheat sheet or punch list step-through process of how we get to this? Because a lot of people, if you remember when I got on the council, Councilmember Clark, I was like, how do all these houses get here like this? I thought it was like last week, last month. But the deal is, the city starts sending out the notices a long time before they get to us, and they have every opportunity. But that last email or certified register letter that they get, they then spring into action, most people, and they now like, oh, can I just come to committee and plead my case and give me 90 days? But we try to work with everybody. Councilmember Clark, then Councilmember Larson.
Well, I was just going to say, without objection, I would make a motion, we hold it in committee for 90 days. It's in Mississippi's ward, she
Second.
doesn't object.
You second?
I did.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded that C5 be held in committee for 90 days. All those in favor, please vote.
You need to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry. You want to speak before we take the vote, Councilmember Larson?
All my questions have been answered. 90 days is very reasonable. They're showing-
Councilman Mundy?
I have a follow-up question. We can vote now, because it's a generic question.
Okay. Can we vote, city clerk?
We did it, I voted.
You didn't vote.
Yes, just did.
It's been approved. Thank you. Councilmember Mundy.
Thank you. My question was on salvage, and I think you've answered, there's someone that's answered this, but I can't remember what prompts the question. Is in looking through these pictures, I saw a couple of appliances that look like they might be in pretty good shape. So things don't go to waste or don't end up in the landfill unnecessarily. Is there any type of salvage that's done, or do we offer that opportunity to Habitat or anyone else?
The property and all the parts and items on the property or within the property are owned by the property owner. So that is their choice. So we don't just take those items. That is for them to either discard.
Dispose of or
Dispose of,
give the
or it's
Habitat or
only, so
goodwill.
we don't do a taking of any of their items. That this is only a demolition once you decide. And after these are properties and items within their property that they have totally discarded, and sometimes for years.
Okay, thank you.
City clerk, please call Councilmember Burke.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Ms. Richmond, a letter is also sent to the property owner giving them a certain amount of time to gather any belongings that are inside the home, appliances or any, before the demolition takes place. Is that correct?
That's correct. That is correct. It's a 15-day letter. And actually, they usually get longer than 15 days.
And do they usually collect? Do they usually come in and take those things?
Most of the time, they have not. In my experience, they have not.
Okay.
Okay, just voted.
City clerk, next item.
Item C6, 1427 Northeast 23rd Street, Trust.
Ms. Harris.
Fire.
1427 Northeast 23rd Street. Notifications of the property violations were sent to the owner required by ordinance. Minimum housing violations, 26. List pendants, all violations submitted to the county clerk's office were filed on July 20th of 2022. The hearing was held July 11th, 2022. The repair demolish order expired on August 28th, 2022. The property became eligible for consideration on September 28th, 2022. Estimated cost to repair the structure is $113,488. The fair market value is $11,500.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Can I get a motion? I mean, what did they, again, explain to the public what the Liz Pendens piece, or either the attorney, what that means for us.
I'll be happy to take that question, Tiffany. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and committee members. Basically, pursuant to state law that was changed probably 18 years ago, staff, when a notice of Liz Pendens is filed and a property changes hands after that is filed, staff does not have to restart the clock all over again and send out a new complaint and notice of hearing. Back in the day, before we got the legislation, whenever property changed hands, we'd have to start the process over. So once this is filed and property changes hands after that, then we're still good to go.
Okay.
Chair, just
Councilmember
to explain what a
McIntosh.
pendants is, it's basically a levy against the property for sanitation or other issues that have come up that it's a financial obligation of the property owner to pay. And if I'm not mistaken, it survives foreclosure. Isn't that correct?
Well, in this instance, it's just a notice to the subsequent buyer of the pending housing proceeding, because there's not a cost that's been incurred at that point in time. But it does survive the foreclosure.
But it can be other things that are levied against the property.
In a sense, if there's a demolition action after that and council approves the assessment of that cost, then yes.
Right.
But the notice itself is simply to put subsequent buyers on notice of the pending housing code enforcement action.
Thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
I'll move approval of C6.
May I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Clark and Monday. We will now vote. And the motion passes. Next item, City Clerk, please.
Item C7, Josie E. Johnson, heir, 1620 North Jackson Avenue.
Notifications of the 1620 North Jackson Avenue. Notifications of the property violations were sent to the owner required by ordinance. Minimum housing violations is 29. All violations were submitted to the county clerk's office to be filed. Hearing was held on September 7, 2022. The repair demolish order expired 10/26/2022. The property became eligible for consideration on October 26, 2022. The estimated cost to repair the structure is $33,895. Tax value of structure is $11,700.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee? Council members, Councilmember Clark.
I move approval of item C7.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Clark and Monday. May we all vote, please? And the motion passes. Thank you. Ms. Harris, City Clerk, next item.
Item C8, Thelma Jackson, heir, 1621 Rockford Street.
Any comments, questions, Ms. Harris?
No.
Okay.
1621 Rockford Street. Due process notifications of the property violations were sent to the owner required by ordinance. Minimum housing violations 14. List pendants, all violations submitted to the county clerk's office to be filed. The hearing was held on September 12, 2022. Repair demolish order expired 10/26/2022. The property became eligible for consideration on 10/26/2022. Estimated cost to repair structure is $5,383. Fair market value of structure is $7,500.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Councilmember Clark.
I'll move approval of item C8.
And second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. When the voting comes up, you may vote.
Dee Dee, I have a question when we finish.
And the motion passes. Councilmember Clark.
Just a general question I noticed of the 4 items, 3 of them were, the heirs were listed. My question is, a generic question is, can you ever find the heirs or who owns these houses?
We do a search for the heirs, and the addresses that we find that we do mail to the heirs.
Do you ever hear
And we
from them?
also publish.
You ever hear from them?
Sometimes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now go to the general agenda. City Clerk.
Item G1, resolution adopting the City of Winston-Salem's legislative priorities for the 2023 legislative session.
Attorney Carmen.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Adams and committee members. You have before you the City Council's legislative package, and I'll run through the bills that are contained within that package fairly quickly. Most of them you've seen before. They were in last year's package. The first one is the bill basically authorizing the city.
Excuse me, Attorney Carmen, is there any way for us to put this on the screen so the audience can see what we're talking about? Thank you. And Attorney Carmen, would you go ahead and give us a short version of why we are doing this and what this is that we do?
Sure. Every year, City Council adopts a legislative package to submit through its local legislative delegation, bills, resolutions to the General Assembly. So this year's package basically has several bills contained within the package. And I'll be happy to start with the first one, which again is a bill that you've seen before. It's a bill to allow cities, it's a statewide bill, to allow cities to basically waive system development fees for parcels that are used for affordable housing purposes. So we're going to submit this as part of your package again this year, and hopefully the General Assembly will be kind enough to enact it this year. This is a piece of or part of the city's affordable housing efforts. It could save developers tens of thousands of dollars in terms of developing a parcel for affordable housing.
Question, and I already kind of know the answer, but with this, if we happen to be lucky enough that the General Assembly allows us, it's really like we're becoming partners. And with us being able to waive the fees at that point, if they are building houses, now we may be able to leverage affordability within the process. Is that not correct?
That is correct. Certainly that's correct. And with the city-owned lots, again, this will be another tool to make those even more attractive
Thank you,
to the developer.
Councilman McIntosh.
Currently, where do those system development fees go when they're paid to us?
It's my understanding they go to the Utility Commission process. See if someone's here to
Mr.
answer that
King
question.
or Mr. King.
City attorney's correct on that. They go to utilities.
Okay, now utilities is an enterprise fund, right?
That is correct.
So how do we're taking money out of their pocket, basically, when we do this. I mean, I understand the goal of this, but is there any way to make them whole in this process?
I don't know that there's a way to make them whole. I know this is a conversation they had, and they're fully supportive of the city's efforts with regard to affordable housing. So I think they understand kind of what they're asking for on that.
What do we feel like the extent or the impact of it will be in dollars? Any idea?
I don't know if we have.
I think Courtney put together some information on potential impacts, and I'll try to get that for council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next.
The next bill, thank you so much, Sandy. Again, you've seen this before. As you all know, we have a 70-30 program that allows the city to pay for certain stormwater development improvements on private property. Generally, the city's paying 70%, the property owner would pay 30%. Because of the current law and some changes that were made in 2015, there was a question raised as to whether or not cities actually have the authority to help with improvements on private property, stormwater improvements. And Mecklenburg County actually submitted a bill in 2015, but the bill applied to cities only, and it authorized counties of a certain size to go ahead and make those improvements. So that, again, raised the question, if counties can do it, do we, cities, need similar legislation? And so the safest approach is to go ahead and ask the General Assembly for a specific legislation to allow cities to make improvements, stormwater improvements on private property, and therefore authorize the city's 70-30 program, which is residential only.
Right.
And so that's what this bill is about.
Yeah. Councilmember Mundy.
Thank you, Chair. In the meantime, is there a moratorium on this?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? City Clerk, next item, please.
And this next bill was in your package last year as well. It's a bill to basically allow civilians to conduct traffic investigations, so you don't have police officers out there who probably need to be engaged in other activities. So this would free the police officers and allow civilians to conduct those investigations. This is basically a statewide bill. There are other municipalities like Greensboro, I think Fayetteville, and Raleigh, and some other cities that are interested in this bill as well.
Next item, please. Any comments or questions on that? Again, we all know why we're asking, but other cities said, wow, we need to jump on with Winston because we only have 3 police and we need people to do the traffic stuff. City Clerk, please.
This next one came about, I guess, during the summer, late spring. Apparently, there was a conversation between Senator Lowe and our fire chief about the needs of the fire department. And based upon that communication between Senator Lowe and the fire chief, Senator Lowe introduced a bill to provide $2 million to pay for a ladder truck for Fire Station 19. That bill did not pass during this last session. And so, given the fact there's still a need for the fire truck, I decided to go ahead and put it before you all as a bill to be included in your legislative package. Before doing so, I made sure that Senator Lowe was still interested in putting forth this bill on behalf of the city of Winston-Salem. So you have it in your package this year, whereas it came about through a different route last time.
Councilmember Scipio.
Go ahead.
Don't we buy our ladder trucks?
We do, but sometimes we do get funds from the General Assembly for specific purposes. Just like you may recall, we got $10 million from the General Assembly for affordable housing, and there was a specific ask of the fire chief in terms of needs. This was on the heels of the Weaver plant fire. And so, again, because it didn't pass the last time and there's still this interest in the bill, I decided to go ahead and put it in the package for you all to vote on this time. Again, I think it's probably driven by the Weaver plant fire. And as I've mentioned to you all before, I know there was some discussion about possible building code changes, asking the Building Code Council to make some changes, the nature of those changes, and the present position of the General Assembly leads one to believe they're not likely to be passed, but this might be, you might be more successful with this approach.
My only comment or question about this is, you did state that we've received, I know we got the 10 million, but that was negotiated through the council and this committee and others. My only concern, again, is when we supersede a process, Mr. Manager, that if a person or an employee can negotiate or mention things to the legislator and others on behalf of the city, then where does that leave us in our process? I think, I know for me as a council member, if there are things that I would like, I always say, and even if a person, an elected official asks me, I say, well, let me get with staff and see what they think. Let me see if this comes through committee for the council to weigh in. I mean, nobody minds getting free stuff, but I believe in the process. And so, again, I want us to understand, and Mr. Garrity and Mr. Attorney, again, I need us to help our staff and teams understand that we cannot supersede the process because there may be other needs in other departments that never bubbled up to the surface because they never had an inroad or Weaver fire to get into that process. So again, I mean, I'm okay with you submitting it, this council, but I just need us to be very careful that all of us are not out here creating deals for ourselves or whatever without the legal team, without the city manager, without the council, and without all of the staff, okay? Any other comments or questions?
I think it's a long shot, but
That's what, I looked at you, I knew that.
but Christmas comes every now and then.
The 10 million, I think, is ours for a while.
Anyway,
Next item, Attorney Carmen.
Okay, this last bill is the result of several conversations about wanting to help for-profit businesses in the form of grants and so forth, and my not being able to find specific authority in the general statutes to be able to provide, for council to provide grants to businesses. So this legislation, if enacted, would allow council to come up with a process and procedures whereby it could provide grants to for-profit, nonprofit businesses that serve the public interest and, quote, well-being of the Winston-Salem community and its citizens. And what we're looking at is businesses that provide an activity that is considered an essential service. An example which would be a critical retail, including but not limited to a grocery store and other type establishments. Again, this bill would give the council a little greater flexibility in being able to provide grants to businesses that serve the greater good of the city of Winston-Salem, which right now we really don't have.
And that kind of goes back, and I'll get to you, Councilmember Clark, to the Weaver fire. We had a whole community hurting, and we basically had to move a mountain to be able to get funds to our citizens who pay taxes, live, work, and play in this community. And then when it came to the businesses, that was months later, and if it had not been for KB Reynolds and the greater Winston-Salem Chamber, those small businesses would not have been able to access any funds to help somewhat make them whole. You know, the intent was to make all of everybody whole, but we knew that wasn't going to happen because that was a lot of money. But it means a lot to people, and it shows how you value them if we're able to step in and partner with whether it's a retailer, a grocery store, putting an emergency facility, responsive facility in communities that do not have any urgent care whatsoever, 24 hours a day, especially when there's a need like it is now to be able to access health care for citizens. Councilmember Clark.
I'm concerned about a slippery slope here. The example is just given of medical care, but our two biggest providers in the city are nonprofits. And I want to say between Atrium and Novant, they're 90% of the market or whatever it may be. I will not support this when we go to Raleigh, but you can keep it included here. I just think there's a slippery slope here, and first thing you know, somebody's buddy's business has an issue, and we're writing checks to for-profit private corporations.
Thank you, Councilmember Clark. Councilmember McIntosh.
It does seem a little bit broad based on what we're really trying to do with it. Is there any way to focus this more on census tracts or populations or AMI?
And that is part of what we'll do if you, well, I'm not going to say, in the package, there's a reference to us crafting the policy, even defining it even more once if it does happen to pass. But again, I've been on this council for 13 years, and I have tried to lobby retail grocers to come to east, southeast, northeast wards of this city where the poor community lives, and we don't have access to fresh vegetables, and when we do, we have to pay astronomical rates for it. The health disparities in our community, not just ours, but across the country, in qualified census tracts are disparaging. And if businesses have over the years felt no need to invest in our community's quality of life, whether it's health, food, and other things, then somebody has to push the envelope to force them, because they only exist because of all of us. They only exist because of working people, poor people that have to spend their disposable incomes to travel to Novant or Atrium when they're sick or whatever. When most of us live within, well, I can get probably to Novant in 15, 20 minutes. I can get to Atrium on Hawthorne, maybe same amount of time. But I think, like I said, people, this is not a done deal. We're gonna have to beg. Some of us will have to beg. And I'm not too proud to beg, and I'm sure some of my counterparts aren't either, when it comes to trying to, if we're giving grants and incentives to businesses to come and bring jobs, again, I always tell people, that's great. But what about the community's quality of life that they're not able to get the job because maybe they're sick, maybe they're not eating during the day because their children have to eat, and now they got to try to go to an interview or somewhere, or try to get to a medical provider. We're not asking people to build a hospital. We're asking for urgent care. We're not asking people to build a Publix or a Trader Joe's, but if they want to come, that's great. We're asking for neighborhood small grocers like the Walmart on University Parkway. That used to be a huge grocery store like Kroger. Comments? Questions? City Attorney.
I was just going to add, it is rather broad, but as the bill indicates, City Council has to develop the policies and procedures. I was trying not to tie your hands too tight such that you won't be able to reach the type of businesses and the areas where they're needed. But yes.
Those that don't get if you don't ask. Councilmember Larson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I think we got to open the door and walk in a little bit and figure out what the room looks like. And we know there's a need out there. We saw it with the pandemic, and we saw it with small businesses and critical operations that were suffering, that were in the public sector. And I'm not sure exactly what the answer is. We've talked about 2 or 3 operations right now, and I think there's probably more. But I do think it's an area we need to look at.
Thank you. Councilmember Burke, then Councilmember Burke, then Councilmember McIntosh.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. It's no surprise to anyone in the chamber that I have been advocating for a grocery store in the Northeast Ward. And most of the time when I speak about the disparities in my communities. And so I echo everything that Mayor Pro Tem said. However we need to word it, tweak it, work it, we need to think about all of our citizens having access to what many of our citizens take for granted. Thank you.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Just on the whole package, first 3 items are statewide bills, and the last 2 are local, correct?
The last one is actually local, yes. Let's see. The fire station is local, that's ours, and then the first 3 are statewide, so yes.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Monday.
I would support this if we were able to restrict it to qualified census tracts and to address inequity. However, with healthcare, somebody mentioned that they're nonprofits. They don't need money from us. They need to be doing the right thing. Atrium and Novant build these facilities where they're needed.
And all that sounds good, and I appreciate it, Councilmember Monday, but I've been on this again, 13 years. This is nothing new. She knows it, he knows it, and he knows it. You gotta keep pushing the envelope, and everybody keeps telling me, well, you know, the hospitals and the nonprofits, we can't make them do anything, and well, now we gotta rethink how we go about trying to get needed services in our communities and other communities that don't have it. And again, if we're not willing, as Councilmember Larson said, to have those difficult conversations, that $10 million we got for housing, I know our legislative team got tired of me with Marla, Tasha, Angela, Lee. Every time they saw one of them, the mayor, they were talking about, we need to build housing and we need a little help. And they were like, Senator Lowe, he called me one morning. He said, I've met with the city attorney and I've talked with the city manager, and I think we may be able to do something. I think we might be able to do something with this. If those of you remember, 10 years ago, I got sick with lupus. I was not a council member for months because I was sick. And at that point, I approached the attorney and the city manager about virtual meetings, if I could participate virtually. And we wrote the bill. The council, I think a couple of people didn't support it. They thought I was trying to take over the government. But the city attorney, I think we sent it to Raleigh, and our legislative group decided they didn't want to fight that battle. Lo and behold, COVID, 2020. They passed that bill probably in 72 hours because nobody wanted to meet in person. So we might not get it now, but someday, some way, we got to hope that they're going to look at it again and say, you know, communities need to be able to do this for their citizens. We're not asking them for money. We're asking them to give us the ability to be able to negotiate and make things happen with other entities for this community. Anything else, City Attorney?
No, that's it. That's the entire package.
We're voting on this?
Yes.
Okay. Can I get a motion, please, for the package?
Move for approval of the package.
It's been moved for, I'm confused. I got a second. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. You guys usually move it very fast. I got caught up. Councilmember Scipio, Councilmember Mundy, you now vote, and this moves the council with 3 approval and 1 abstain. Thank you so much. Next item, please.
Item G2, presentation on Piedmont Triad Regional Workforce Development Board's impact on Winston-Salem.
Mr. Rao.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tempore Adams and members of the City Council. The Council's 2022-2025 strategic plan includes several action items in its Tier 1 priorities related to job creation and workforce development. Part of those action plans or action items involves, looking for collaborative engagements with local workforce development providers. And so today we've invited representatives from the Piedmont Triad Regional Workforce Development Board to provide an update on their programs and services and how they benefit the city of Winston-Salem. So I'd like to recognize Wendy Walker-Fox, who is the Workforce and Economic Development Director for the Piedmont Triad Regional Council, and Jessica Raby, who is the Assistant Director.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Thank you all very much for having us here.
Would you give your name and address for the record, please?
Absolutely. Wendy Walker-Fox. I'm the Workforce and Economic Development Director at Piedmont Triad Regional Council. And joining me is Jessica Raby, who is the Workforce and Economic Development Assistant Director at the Piedmont Triad Regional Council. So before we give the update on the impacts for Winston-Salem in particular, just want to give a little bit of foundational information about workforce development, our funding, how those funds get to us, how they're managed, that sort of information. Just a really quick definition of WIOA. That's the federal funds that come down. WIOA stands for Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. These funds are, again, federal funds that are designed to help job seekers access employment, education, training, and supportive services. And the ultimate goal is to help these individuals succeed in the labor market and to match employers with the skilled workers. So we're helping job seekers and also employers, and certainly providing skills and connections that both of these entities need to compete in the global economy. This is just a quick overview of the funds distribution. You see they start at the federal level. The funds are then distributed to the state. They go to the Department of Commerce and then the Division of Workforce Solutions. They are then distributed to the local workforce development areas. The fiscal and administrative entity for our workforce local area is the Piedmont Triad Regional Council, so the Council of Governments. We're located in Kernersville, and we currently serve a 7-county local area for workforce development. And Forsyth County and the city of Winston-Salem is included in that catchment area. Through the COG, then those funds are distributed to help individuals and also our employers. Those WIOA funds, or those workforce dollars, are specifically mandated by the federal government for particular populations. And there are 3 specifically. We have dislocated workers, and those are individuals and adults who have become unemployed due to no fault of their own. There's also the adult population, and these are low-income adults who are 18 and older who have barriers to employment and education. And then the third group would be youth, individuals the age bracket of 16 to 24 who face significant barriers to employment. And then it's the out-of-school youth population that is the focus federally mandated by these dollars that we do have to focus our services on. The specific job seeker services that are provided with these federal workforce dollars: career advising, and this, we have trained staff. We don't actually provide these services in-house. We have a contracted service provider, and that contracted service provider is Goodwill of Northwest North Carolina. We have some individuals here from Goodwill. The center is located right on University Parkway in their Goodwill facility. We have trained staff there that provide personalized career planning and case management services to individuals, and that includes training and education, and that's where participants gain employable skills and complete credentials in high-demand industries. And then, of course, there are supportive services. These are additional no-cost services that further remove barriers to employment and education, and that could be transportation assistance, help with childcare registration, things of that nature. And again, here are the Winston-Salem locations. There's Goodwill Industries, that's right on University. That is the main NC Works location. Then we have some satellite offices. There's one on Peters Creek Parkway, and then we have an office co-located on the campus of Forsyth Tech. Now, specifically for the city of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, we don't have a breakdown for the city itself. Our metrics are done based on counties. So the breakdown that you see in front of you are expended funds for program year 21-22 for Forsyth County. You'll see the breakdown of some specific grant funding that we received. The Finish Line grant, which is focused on helping individuals complete their education. Maybe they came up against some type of specific barrier. I mean, it could be something as simple as someone who needs car tires. That's impacting them getting to school to finish their education, and we're able to purchase new tires for them. So you'll see the funding there, the National Dislocated Worker Grant that we had, and then our traditional workforce or WIOA funding. You see the breakdown in the adult, dislocated worker, and youth categories. So a total of $1.4 million that's been spent in the county this past program year. So that's just kind of a quick overview of the services that we offer for individuals. Are there any specific questions about anything there before I move forward?
Councilmember Scipio.
Do you grant to smaller agencies or just to those 4 that you showed?
By agents, The four, are you speaking of our contracted service provider?
Goodwill
We
and
do.
Society.
So what we do is we put out an RFP, so a request for proposal. We do that every 3 years, and that is a requirement. That's a state and federal requirement for these funds. And it's dependent on the proposals that we receive back. That determines on who we grant those dollars to run our programs. So of course, we look at a lot of different criteria, experience, the administrative ability to handle the funds that are coming through. So it is a competitive grant process that we go through.
But you do it every 3 years, but not every year.
No, not every year.
Okay.
Not every year. We're required to do it every 3 years.
Is there somewhere an agency could look to find out whether you're looking for RFPs and
Yes.
when the next round would be?
Yes. So we do public, we make a public announcement of that.
Councilmember Clark.
Oftentimes, when we recruit a new company, we ask them to do job fairs. Do y'all do any job fairs or participate with them?
We absolutely do. Jessica, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the resources?
Absolutely. So some of the, Wendy spoke specifically about our job.
Would you talk in the mic,
So sorry.
please?
Let me scoot over.
We'll just switch.
Yeah. Wendy spoke a lot about our job seeker services, but we also have business engagement services, and typically our job fairs are coming on the request of a business who's either come into a career center and requested those services, or we have staff at our workforce board who work directly with businesses to provide some of the services that you see here. Some of those are taking our mobile career center out to hold job fairs. We have laptops, Wi-Fi, so that individuals can access an application on site, whatever that may look like, or we could hold them in one of our career centers.
Last question.
Yeah.
In the paper, we have a very low unemployment rate, 3.7, I think, something like that. But on the other hand, we talk about a slowing economy with high interest rates. What is your feeling of the marketplace? Are there a lot of people looking for jobs?
There are people
Is
looking
it
for
getting better or
jobs.
worse? Whatever.
Well, we are in a challenging time. Our focus is really on those who we consider disengaged. So we can talk about a low unemployment rate, but we also have low participation in the job market. So what we're looking to do is access folks and figure out what those barriers are to get people back into the workforce. What is it that's keeping you out? Is that something that our supportive services can provide? Is that a training need? So where can we locate those disengaged individuals?
Okay, thank you.
In your presentation, and for those that I'm going to ask these questions. In your presentation, you said there were 4 groups for the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And the youth piece of it is $500,000, more than $500,000. But when you look at the career services provided for that same breakout of groups, there's only 64 youth versus 2,000 plus for each of the other breakouts. My question is, what are you doing to make that better? And if you're not able to engage youth, only 64, and they got more money than the other 2 breakout groups, what do you do with the money?
I'm happy to talk about that. I'll be honest, it takes a lot more to engage youth with those significant barriers. So when we're talking about barriers for youth, we're looking at things that are really challenging for that individual. Sometimes adults come in and they just need help accessing a job. When we have a youth that qualifies for services, they're couch surfing, they're a single mother at a young age, they're really struggling, so it's necessary to spend more on youth. So we're always going to have a little bit lower numbers in youth. Youth engagement is also very difficult. We're talking about out-of-school youth. These are disengaged individuals. They're no longer plugged in with a high school system or a high school setup. We're re-engaging them to access GED services and then into training. So typically, and by design and by eligibility requirements, there are additional barriers for a youth to qualify as compared with an adult.
I guess, again, I'd be interested to see what is it that you do in a report? And don't get me wrong, I'm one of these people, and she knows, we meet. I question everything, because if I'm spending $500,000 on a process and all I'm getting is 64 people, where I'm getting over 2,000 with less money for the other groups, and I know they're adults and whatever, but $500,000, if I'm spending $9,000 on each child, I could give them the money and they'll show up. I might not have to do nothing. I just like to know how you're engaging to get people, as Councilmember Clark said, to come to the table. Another thing that I noticed in your employer engagements was that the Winston-Salem Fire Department is on that list.
Yeah.
And may I ask, what is it that you do to help or facilitate that group?
So what we've worked with the fire department to do is they came to us with a challenge of they were having an exorbitant number of folks go through the physical testing requirements as part of their application process for their standard firefighter role. What they found out after folks were completing that physical requirement is that they didn't have the reading or the mathematics skills to complete the job, but they had already invested funds in having folks complete the physical training. So we developed an assessment through one of our assessment platforms through IBM to have folks go through that training assessment, and then only those who pass the minimum requirements for standard reading and writing, or reading and mathematics, excuse me, are then able to go through the physical assessment, so that they're no longer spending those funds and time and energy to have these many people go through the physical assessment when they don't have the minimum requirements to complete the job.
One more question and I'm done. To my knowledge, we have people that apply to the fire department. I'm just using the fire department for an example. And what I've noticed, I'm gonna keep bringing up my 13 years. I know that might not seem like much, but it's a lifetime when you're doing this. I've always questioned the city manager, the fire chief, and the assistant manager who directs the public safety side. Why is it there is no intentional diversity in that area, that department? Now, granted, we got 2 or 3, 4 or 5 others in the city, and I've directed the assistant manager to get with HR and get the council a report of where is it that we are literally pushing businesses to do intentional diversity and inclusion and equity, but we're not doing it. I need to know, and I don't know whether you can share it. Maybe I need to come and see for myself. What is it that you do for this fire department that somehow minorities are not making the cut? That's a problem. Because if we're not challenging you to help intentionally diversify and be inclusive in our workforce, then there's something wrong. And I've been talking this for 13 years. Why is it that minorities cannot pass these tests or get in the fire department? When I get calls from parents and others about their child, B student, honor roll, could have went on to college, so, PSATs, and they can't get a job with the fire department. So I need to understand what the wraparound services are that you provide to us as a partner, because I'm coming to visit and I'm gonna want that. And any other council members, one of them anyway, or 2 of them that's not on this committee, they can come too, but I need to understand that, because we may enlist you even more so to help us understand why the diversity is not in particularly the fire department and the 2 or 3 other departments within the city of Winston-Salem. Councilmember Burke.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. The points that you made, the questions that you have raised, I did raise those questions also with Chief Mayo when I first came on council regarding the diversity or lack of in the fire department. And we ended up right where we are today with this discussion. And it came down to individuals taking the assessment and not being successful. So I offered what I know with 30 years of education. We need some test prep courses in the areas of reading and writing. And we need to make sure that before our potential candidates sit for a test, that they are proficient in those areas. And we can work with them to get them where they need to be so that when they do take these assessments, they are successful. Thank you.
Councilmember Monday.
I know you're not through with your presentation, but this is new news to me. I know about the Council on Governments, but this was very good news for me. But what I wonder is when we do have a new business coming in and we talk about what are the jobs that need to be filled, how are those dots connected? I mean, we don't call you, from here. So what is the process to make sure that you are getting the information on new businesses coming in and what their needs are?
So we work really closely with our economic development partners specifically to make sure that we have those ties. A lot of times when a new business is coming to the area, they're trying to recruit a new business, we're part of that package that they're submitting to the company. So we'll write a letter of support outlining the services that we can provide, typically data as well, just to say this is what we see for this industry and the roles that you're talking about. So our partnerships are really key in that to make sure that we're being very communicative and that they're comfortable sharing that with us, because we know that that can also be a point of privacy when you have a business coming.
So chances are you know it then before we do. But that's good to know. I just didn't know that. So I'm glad the dots are already being connected behind the scenes.
And I'll add, I stumbled a little bit when I was giving you Jessica's title, and that's because we just recently, back in June, merged the Economic Development Department and our Workforce Development Department. And really the impetus behind that was that we see a true connection. You know, any business that's coming to look at an area, the first thing they want to talk about is workforce and talent. So that really puts us in a better position to be at the table at the beginning of conversations to really talk about what is available for those businesses.
Thank you for that explanation.
I know that I'm on the Human Development Advocacy Committee for the National League of Cities, and I'm vice chair, as a matter of fact. And one of the things that perplexed, I found out even with elected officials over the past year and a half I've been doing this, they don't understand what workforce development is, and you've heard me say that. It's a catchword to me. If you ask anybody in this room what it is, probably 90+% couldn't tell you what it is, what it does, what it's supposed to do. And I think with the infrastructure money, the COVID money, the CARES, the ARPA and rescue and all of this other money, part of the structure of those bills and those acts was that people like me and others were advocating that workforce development be built in it. How can you build something if you don't have a trained workforce to build it? You know? So my challenge or task to you guys, again, is I think you need to up your branding and your marketing of what is it that you do? Because every grant that came across our desk for the ARPA money, most of them, if not over half of them, dropped that catchphrase, we're gonna do workforce development. But nobody really even said really what that means. And I think if you're already partnering with the fire department, Mr. Garrity, we may need to plug them in with these grants that we're giving the organizations that they say they're gonna do workforce. They're gonna have to drill down if they're gonna move forward with this, because I'm not comfortable that nobody seemed to really explain what that means in their request. But one more thing and I'm done. I also, and maybe I missed it, but I know I read this thing 4 or 5 times, the numbers of diversity. If you've helped 4,200, whatever, all these people, just like businesses, because we're partners, I need to see your diversity numbers of who you're helping. You may not be able to, and you may be able, you said you couldn't tell us if they were Winston-Salem, but I still need to know even the county, there's diversity in Forsyth County. Okay?
Yeah, we can definitely track diversity. It's not something that we currently look at. And to speak to your point earlier about that diversity piece and whether we need to provide additional training to those individuals that are pursuing a career with the fire department, looking at that additional educational piece is certainly something that we can help with. And looking at something that would be beneficial to those individuals. So we can certainly take that back. We welcome the opportunity to work with you all as partners and certainly want to come to the table and help out in any way that we can. I don't want to belabor any of the points and feel like I have to go through all of the minutia of this presentation, but I do want to get to the strategic initiatives because we do look at workforce development, there's your catchword, a little bit different. And, we don't see workforce development as a human services or an entitlement program. It really is about driving the economy, and
Absolutely.
it really is about talent and talent
Absolutely.
development. So we work really hard. We did talk about the WIOA dollars, those federal dollars. That money's very soft. That money has gone down every single year from the feds. So we get it. We know we're going to get some of it, but we don't really depend on that. And we look for other ways to leverage those dollars. So we are constantly looking for grant opportunities to augment those federal dollars. That also gives us a lot of flexibility in who we serve. Because we're not bound by the parameters of the federal dollars. So this list just goes over some of our current strategic initiatives. We're involved with a lot of economic development work. This Carolina Across 100 is focused specifically on opportunity youth, and those are youth with barriers. And it's really about exposing those youth to what's available in their own backyard. We're having conversation with youth between the ages of 16 and 24, and they are saying, yes, I'm going to go get some training, but then I'm going to go get a job in Raleigh, or I'm going to go get a job in Charlotte. So we want them to know what's available here in Winston-Salem. There's a lot here available in their backyard, and we want to keep that talent here. Our nctriad.com website, that is a complete talent attraction and retention website that we pulled together. And then, of course, Jessica mentioned our mobile fleet. One special grant that we're working on right now is an ARC grant. And I know a lot of you know Matthew Dodge, our executive director at the COG. Matthew has spoken extensively with the Appalachian Regional Commission about the fact that none of their grants focus on distressed census tracts. So he has gotten them into a place where we think that we're going to be able to get some ARC funding for a distressed census tract in Winston-Salem. We're looking at, our proposal is really about having an individual that can be co-located someplace in the city to work with organizations, whether it be Winston-Salem State University, whether it be the city of Winston-Salem. So ideas that you all have, bringing then our resources from the COG, and how do we help make those things happen? Is this a grant writer? Is this someone that can help us work on finding additional funding? What is this? But it's going to have someone embedded here in the city that can really, really make that connection.
Thank you.
So we are working to really bolster that partnership.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark.
First off, I think a lot of the questions that were asked probably should be addressed to the fire chief if we have issues in that area. Having said that, we had the superintendent of the Winston-Salem County Schools here 3 or 4 weeks ago, and she showed us the 3rd and 8th grade test results. I think those are the critical years they do them. My children are older than y'all, so it's been a long time since I've been in school, but they were absolutely dismal.
Yeah.
I'm thinking in the 30% range, something like that. I don't remember exactly. But we should not be surprised if 2/3 of our students are producing at 3rd or 8th grade levels, that then they get a proficiency test. So what goes around comes around. And her goal, I think, was 80% by 2030 or something. I don't remember the numbers, but certainly have to be there. But I think if we want to help the fire chief, we've got to come up with a program where folks can enroll in it and have a concentrated course on reading and math to get them to where they need to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Monday.
Do you all offer classes and training and services for Spanish speakers who don't speak English?
So we don't offer any specific training through us, but our service providers, and we typically work with the community colleges. That is our number one go-to service provider. So yes, to answer your question, that was a long way around that.
And that would
Yes.
include ESL?
Yes,
Okay,
yes. And
thank
we
you.
fund those,
Great,
that
thank you.
training, yes.
Any more comments or questions? Thank you.
Thank you for
And
having
we look
us.
forward to working with you.
Absolutely.
Partners.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Item G3, progress report by the Development Finance Initiative on the development of a citywide land bank program.
Ms. Newman.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee and council. Marla Newman, Community Development Director. I am here this evening to introduce to you representatives from the Development Finance Initiative with the UNC School of Government. As you'll recall, we first actually had a study by the Center for Community Progress. And with that study, one of the things that they recommended in looking at our vacant, abandoned, and deteriorated properties was that we figure out a way to manage the over 500 parcels of chronic violator properties that we were maintaining. And one of the suggestions was that we explore a land bank. Subsequent to that, we engaged with Grounded Solutions Network for the For Everyone Home initiative, and it turns out that that was also a recommendation that was made by that particular engagement. And so this spring, you all approved us engaging the School of Government's Development Finance Initiative to actually start the process of exploring what it would take to, in fact, create a land bank. And so this afternoon, I'm going to introduce to you Sarah Odio from DFI, and she's here with her colleague, Frank Maraca. And Sarah will, or Ms. Odio, will walk you through this presentation to tell you where they are to date in the work that we've engaged them to do on our behalf. And so I'll turn it over to Ms. Odio.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to see you all in person. I previously had a chance to meet with some of you regarding affordable housing. So,
could you give your name? And
my name is
address?
Sarah Odio. I'm the Assistant Director for Housing and Revitalization at the Development Finance Initiative. My address is 113 Mellow Oak Drive, Chapel Hill. All right, so our plan for today is there's no deliverable today. We're just bringing you along on the journey of exploring what it would take to create a land bank program. So I'll start with a little bit of a project overview. Reiterate, I know you all have had a couple of reports done, but really what is a land bank program and how does it work? We have drafted some preliminary goals for this program, and we would really love to get your reaction today on these goals. We'll wait till the end after we go through everything, but that's going to be one of the primary goals of today, which is what do you think of these goals, and are they consistent with what you were hoping for? And we will talk you through what we have accomplished so far, which is taking a look at potential inventory for a program, what that looks like, and what an acquisition strategy could look like for a land bank, and then some next steps from there. So who are we? Who am I? So the Development Finance Initiative is a program of the UNC Chapel Hill School of Government. I think you're all familiar with the school and the services that they provide across the state. We focus at DFI specifically on real estate development and finance, and that ranges from pre-development for an affordable housing site and bringing a development partner to the table for that, to assessing development opportunities at a neighborhood level and thinking about neighborhood strategies for revitalization. We work all across the state, communities, large, small, distressed census tracts, and not distressed census tracts. So we were specifically engaged for this project to help you all create a model for a land bank program. The scope of work for this includes establishing the priorities for this program or the goals, so what do you want it to accomplish? We are also conducting market segmentation, so trying to understand and visualize what you all already know about your markets at the neighborhood level, and looking at parcels and identifying opportunities. So how do you actually get land into the land bank program? So this has been completed to date. Next up is developing a financial model to actually test the feasibility of up to 3 acquisition strategies. So you'll see different property types today. They have different costs associated with them. And if you target one neighborhood over another, you will also have different costs associated with it. And so the next step will be actually putting numbers to these strategies, which in my opinion is the most important part to really understand the impact of this. And we are also working with the Center for Community Progress, who wrote that report and are the experts on community land banks, to develop a business plan. So how do you what kind of staff do you need to dedicate for this? What skills do you need on your team in order to be able to run a program into the future? So how does a land bank program work in North Carolina? Some states have legislation that allow for land banks. North Carolina does not. So you are able to run what is called a program. How it works is that the property starts in private ownership. So you have an owner that isn't paying taxes for multiple years, and or they are chronic code enforcement violators. This has significant cost to the local government. So it is suppressing property taxes within the neighborhood. It's increasing municipal service expenses because if someone's not mowing the lawn, you are mowing the lawn. And it also has a lot of cost implications for neighbors. So as they're thinking about, renovating their homes or selling their homes or generating value in their homes, they are impacted by what is going on next door. And so you have a property in this condition. Typically, the county will foreclose on that property for unpaid taxes after a period of time. And so it goes into public ownership through that process. Where the land bank program comes in is that the city of Winston-Salem the program itself will then bid on the property at public auction. So if you had legislation at a state level, you would be first in line. So if the land bank wants a property, they get a property out of foreclosure. In case of North Carolina, you would be a bidder like any other. And so you may elect to compete. You may prefer that somebody else gets it. Or you may be the only bidder and acquire a property at public auction. The program then focuses on stabilizing that property and marketing that site. So the process at this point becomes, okay, let's clean it up. Let's make sure it doesn't deteriorate further. If it's a property itself, demolish if necessary. If it's undeveloped, let's keep it mowed, keep it tidy. There are other sources of inventory. This is the primary one, but a land bank program may, after a period of time, start receiving donations from residents that want to support it. There may be opportunities for private purchase, property swaps, or other governments that would transfer property to the program. The goal of the land bank program, and I will stress this multiple times because it's often lost in the conversation, is to then sell this property. It's not to hold property. The goal of the land bank program is to sell it to a private partner, a for-profit, or a nonprofit that will put this property back into the tax rolls in a way that is consistent with the land bank goals. So the program has the option not to sell it to an owner who has consistently allowed its rental properties to go into a bad state, right? You can pick a partner that has proven that they are responsible landlords, for example, or you can sell to a homeowner. So this is how the program itself works. These are the functions of the program. One of the main functions is strategic acquisition. So identifying and targeting properties for acquisition that meet program goals. So this isn't getting properties willy-nilly, any property that might be available. It's setting goals. What does this program want to achieve, and where do we want to focus these acquisitions? It would be competing for tax foreclosed properties at public auction and making strategic purchases, developing relationships so that there be other avenues for inventory for the program. The program then manages, right? You need the skills and staff to manage the portfolio itself. So when you purchase the property at foreclosure, you are clearing the titles on these properties. If you are purchasing it and it has all these liens on it, first step is going to be to clear that title. You'll then make any repairs or renovations to stabilize that property as a program, maintain properties, and prepare them for resale. And then at disposition, one of the key parts of the land bank program is engaging the community. This is neighborhood level work that we're talking about. These are small infill properties in neighborhoods that are mostly distressed. And so engaging the community around a strategy, that is going to be one of the key components of any land bank program. Marketing the portfolio and identifying buyers, as I previously said. Any questions about how this works? But I'm going to cover a lot of ground, so I'll have a pause at the end for a lot of feedback.
We've had a lot of speakers.
Good.
Training sessions on housing, so
okay.
We have an idea, all of us. We know what you're talking about.
Great. So you then are familiar with this, which is that unlike most communities that do have land bank programs, Winston-Salem is growing rapidly. And it might not feel like you're growing that fast relative to other communities in North Carolina, but North Carolina is growing really quickly. And so your growth is consistent with what is happening in North Carolina. And so you see a lot of big communities that deploy land banks, like Buffalo, New York, Baltimore, that they do it because they have a declining population or stagnant population, and the stock of vacant and abandoned properties continues to grow. And they need to step in and do something about it. Winston-Salem is a little bit different, in which you don't have you kind of have the opposite problem. You don't have that much stock, right? But you still do have a lot of these properties that are vacant and abandoned for various reasons. There is so much activity happening in Winston. So you could see in this map, these are property sales in a 2-year period between June 2020 and June 2022. So people are here purchasing properties. The difference is who's buying, where, and for what reason, and at what price. So this all breaks down very differently when we start looking at the neighborhoods. A big trend that is happening in Winston-Salem, as you are all very familiar with, is that while your sales continue at a rapid pace, the nature of these sales is changing, and you're having more and more investors coming in to purchase multiple properties at once. A lot of speculation is occurring in the market at the moment. So with that in mind, we drew on the reports that have already been done. So the Center for Community Progress report, the Grounded Solutions report. We looked at your policies for affordable housing, for city land, and all of the other work that you all have done to think about property and acquisition and how you want to intervene as a community. And these are some goals that are appropriate for a land bank. Because you've got big goals, what is actually appropriate for a land bank program? So off the bat, stabilize any vacant and deteriorating properties to improve the vitality of neighborhoods. Place properties back into productive use through an equitable and strategic process. Support, where appropriate, the preservation or creation of affordable housing in accordance with the city's policy for city-owned property. And efficiently use public investment to maximize impact. Now, I know that this program was floated really very much for a long time as like an affordable housing program. And it can be one piece in that, but it is not the only tool, and I will talk more about that. So the first part of our analysis was understanding what you already know inherently, but what is happening in these markets. Which are the markets that are accelerating or exclusive at this point, that are expensive to get into, where investor interest is quickly translating to sales, renovations, properties, and where is it where the purchases are happening, but it's much more speculative. And so we looked at a lot of different variables and broke down the neighborhoods as these segments. So weak, meaning that these various segments are breaking down and that you're getting, the sale prices are far below what is happening at the median level. And exclusive where it's far above the median. But other factors came into play here on how we broke down these different ones, including where are properties getting purchased and actually renovated versus where they are not getting renovated, purchased but not renovated. Where are there vacant and distressed properties? Where are investors making a lot of sales, making a lot of purchases, but not translating that? So just looking at what that means, so if we look at a neighborhood, for example, like the Ardmore neighborhood, this is just an example that we pull, that qualifies as an accelerating market. You can see here that the median sale price is around $237,000. That's about a $50,000 difference change in median sale price in a 3-year period. And about 20% of the purchases happening here are investor purchases. But attached to this, there's a lot of rehab and renovation activity. So people are buying and then putting money into the community. There are very few vacant and abandoned, deteriorated properties. There are 3. And the public also doesn't really own that many properties in this area because people don't let it go to foreclosure. There's too much value. They could just sell it on the market and get out if they needed to.
Excuse me.
Yes.
This is very interesting. No, really. But my meeting ends at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Give you a little bit of.
How much, Councilman Mack, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So Northeast Winston's the opposite. All right, so the property types that we're looking at for the land bank inventory range from undeveloped lots. These are properties that have 2+ years of tax delinquency. The goal for equity is never looking at properties that have an occupant in them. So the land bank program would never target a homeowner who has been tax delinquent for 5 years. The entire goal is to focus on properties that are unutilized, abandoned properties. And so the bulk of your inventory will be around undeveloped lots. The program should also focus on heirs properties, which could be vacant lots, it could be single-family homes, but they require a lot more effort upfront before foreclosure, a lot more funding upfront before foreclosure in order to ensure that these properties can actually
The
make it
numbers
into
you
the
show
program.
there, are those real numbers?
Yes, these are real numbers. So we did an analysis of all of the properties in Winston-Salem. We looked at publicly owned properties as well as privately owned properties with tax foreclosures, water cutoff, and nuisance code enforcement liens,
And
specifically
VAD stands
chronic.
for vacant.
And all of these are vacant.
What does VAD stand for?
Oh, it means vacant, abandoned, and deteriorated properties.
Okay.
So the shorthand that you'll hear me use is VAD properties.
But there's a house on the property.
There can be a house, but it is vacant, boarded up, deteriorated.
Yeah, we know about those.
Yes. And so you have about 160 of those that would be potential inventory for a land bank program. Of course, if you've got someone who steps up and says, and we'll pay our taxes, and you let that go right away, right? But if no one's responding or ready to move, that's where you go. So I'm trying to move as quickly as possible. I think it's, okay. So next step is we're going to analyze 4 strategies for acquisition. This is going to be the most important part, the financial impact, but we want to give you kind of a sneak peek at what we're looking at for acquisition. So you already own an extraordinary amount of properties across the city, roughly 441 publicly owned vacant properties. These range from undeveloped to single-family abandoned, deteriorated structures. This is the low-hanging fruit for a program. You don't have to go through any real formal process in order to start thinking about these properties as part of a land bank program. The goal, what we're going to study here, is looking at trying to put properties back into productive use that are in weak markets, where you will require more patience and a strategic framework. Because if someone wanted to purchase this right, in many ways they would have already out of foreclosure, or they would have competed for this. And so this is about how do we market prepare these properties that no one has wanted until now to get them back onto the tax rolls and contributing to the vitality of that neighborhood. Another opportunity that we see is kind of likely going to be the more high-cost one, which will require a city-county partnership. And that's looking at heirs properties in these weak markets. These are those hard to move, incredibly challenging properties. The land bank program is designed to have the time and patience to address these properties.
I have a question on these, the heir properties. Usually you can't find the heirs, and they're hard to find. So nothing can be done with the properties. So what is your suggestion if you're going to put those in a land bank? How do you get the properties if you can't get a clear title?
Well, I think that's part of the process, is that they can eventually be foreclosed on through the tax foreclosure process. So if they are not paying taxes for a certain period of time, the county can take action against them. It is not advised to do that without trying in many ways to reach these owners, right? Because a lot of the times the heirs don't even know that they have a right to this property and the value of this property. And so that's where we say a city-county partnership, resources to help fund a team and attorneys that are really going to get out there and try to clear this in a more equitable, strategic way. So another opportunity that we're going to assess is vacant single family, or where there are structures that potentially could be renovated. Looking at these constrained markets where we can probably see a higher resale value, because it's going to cost more to stabilize an actual structure, right? For undeveloped, you just mow it. For an actual structure, you do need to maintain it. And so you want to, on the back end, when you sell it, hopefully try to realize some value, or at least get your money back. And it's going to be easier to do that in a more constrained market as opposed to these weaker markets. Yes?
What do these numbers mean?
I didn't want to put individual they were very easily identifiable on this one.
I mean, what does one?
Oh, it means one
versus
property.
Two versus the
it means
seven?
one property there, 3 properties there, 2
Oh,
properties,
and
7
7 down.
properties.
Okay.
Yes, sorry about that. And then another big opportunity, your biggest opportunity, because outside of publicly owned sites, are undeveloped lots that haven't paid taxes for more than 2 years. And this is the most common type. There are lower carrying costs, right? So you could you already hold on to a lot of undeveloped sites and mow them and do all of that. This would create a more formal process for that and try to get them, again, back out into the market. Now, I've heard a lot, and I read in the Grounded Solutions report, a lot of talk about the land bank program as a way to minimize displacement. And I want to emphasize that the land bank program might not be that tool. It is a tool that can help facilitate other approaches that do minimize displacement. But the land bank program alone doesn't do that. It's a public entity focused on converting properties into productive use. Control, stabilize, dispose. There's another tool that was also in the Grounded Solutions report, and that's what we call a community land trust. And this is typically a private or a nonprofit that holds the land in perpetuity to provide affordable housing and other community assets. So the goal of the community land trust is to maintain control of that property in order to address community needs. So it is very different in that sense. And it creates that opportunity to provide affordable housing in these transitioning and accelerating areas, because it is removing the value of the land from the property sale and from the house. I emphasize this because they can work really well together, right? The land bank program can then go to the trust and say, hey, we have this opportunity with this site. Does this work within your goals if there is a land trust in place? But the land bank program does not do what a community land trust does. And just emphasizing that not all publicly owned land is ideal for a land bank program. So if you're thinking about low-income housing tax credits, that's a project that I'm starting with you all as well soon. The land bank doesn't add any value, right? It's not going to give you any additional tools that you don't already have as a city, any additional authority. And, you know, you're not going to want to put property into the land bank program that you're never going to have an exit from, right? So some properties may, like properties in your flood zone, properties that probably make a great fit for a park, right? That's going to go to another department that will go within another entity. And so not all publicly owned properties, not all properties that are about to be foreclosed on should go into the land bank. And so I wanted your feedback on these goals and any questions that you might have about what I've shown you today, knowing that next up, we're going to come back with the financial modeling. We're going to talk about what it means to manage the portfolio and define approaches.
Councilmember Clark.
Just real quick, because time's running out. I had the opportunity to visit at one of our national meetings with someone from Detroit. City of Detroit probably has 300,000 to 400,000 fewer people today than it had in its heyday. I'm trying to remember that number, but it's huge. And up there, they've got whole neighborhoods where they'll pay you to move into a house. That's not the situation we have here. I think a couple of our challenges are properties that tend to go into decline more often than not are bought by, you call it private sector or investors or whatever it may be, but we have neighborhoods where 70% maybe are rental properties, and that creates its own challenges. The other challenge I see we have is we own oodles. Now, that's a big number. I mean, I think we probably own the at least 400 lots that we could put a single-family house on, maybe a lot more than that.
441.
441. And I'd be curious how you counted Happy Hills, because I counted down there alone, we had enough room for over 100 single-family houses, and that doesn't count the housing authority. It's got another 100 or so. But anyway, where I'm looking for some help is, what do we do with all these lots? I don't know if you were here at the beginning of this meeting. We condemned 3 houses today that needed to be condemned and torn down. 2 of the 3 had fires. One had a tree that went through it. We're going to can own, because we're going to put a lien on those properties after we tear them down. But the challenge we have is where so many of these lots are, it's not economical to build a new house unless we help pay for it. So I'm looking for any help you can give us. How do we deal with all this property we have? And it just keeps coming. And we've bought a lot of lots in the last year or so on top of that. We've just got hundreds of places we could build something, from single family to apartments or whatever. To me, it's the resources of where you get the money from. And I'll just leave you with one last comment. We have a Choice Neighborhoods Initiative project, which you're probably aware of. It sounds great, but the price tag, the total price tag for the city is going to be $40, $50, $60 million when it's all put together. Ms. Scipio had 2 studies done of 2 of her neighborhoods. The price tags we got back was $40 million for one and $60 million for another. We're talking about astronomical numbers in some of these neighborhoods, and I look forward to what suggestions you have there. And I also hope your football team comes in second this weekend, but they're going to be in town.
Had to go there.
Councilmember McIntosh.
So I've got multiple pages of questions. I'd like to set up a meeting and talk to you folks
Great.
offline, because there's
do
an
that.
awful lot. I mean, I've kind of been through this drill from the private sector side.
Yes.
Having done a lot of renovation in older neighborhoods, so I've got tons of questions. I mean, I like the structure, but there's lots of stuff. I guess one of the good things that I feel like we have going for us is we can kind of jumpstart this pretty quickly because we own so much.
We own a
So
lot.
setting up a quick and dirty RFP to test the market for what the interest level is seems to be something we can do pretty quickly without, going way down the road with lots more.
And I mean, I'll say just preview, we're not there yet, but it could be just dedicating a staff member their time for a period of time to establish this program and to kind of address Councilmember Clark's questions, which is also just thinking about how you do actually move these properties.
Thank you.
Councilmember Scipio.
Thank you for this presentation. Yeah, I think we're already the largest land banker in the city. I mean, we're just officially putting a title to it, but when you own 400-plus lots, you're already banking them. What to do with them is all about the dollars and cents. So if I'm hearing you correctly, your next presentation's going to come with some dollars. What would it take to transform some of these properties, and how long should it be in this plan and that kind of thing? And when will that be?
That's going to be in December, January. I'm trying to. December
Probably
is the
January.
goal.
About first of the year, January.
Yes,
Very
yes.
good.
I was going to say December will be done, but nobody wants to meet mid-December, so.
You come.
I can come, no one will be here.
We won't be here.
Are there, and then I'm going to close, are there any other cities nearby or cities in North Carolina within driving, not like 4 or 5 hours? We know about Durham and some others, but are there some that over the past years that have developed that we could go visit or whatever?
That have formally created a land bank program. Chapel Hill has dabbled in it, but no, this really would be the model for land bank program in North Carolina.
All right, we're going to be a poster child and a benchmark. I got it. I like it. I would like to invite you back, Ms. Newman, whenever we can in January so we can have more time. We might have to break it up, or we might have to do a special meeting or something. But I think this presentation, or what you're telling us, has been very helpful. So when I said this is very interesting, it truly is very interesting because you communicated it at a level that everybody got it. And I think that was the deal for us. So we look forward to working with you in the future. And as Councilmember Clark or McIntosh and Councilmember Larson has a comment.
Yeah, I would like to know of all the 400 and something parcels that we currently own, how many of them actually have dwellings on them? And if an assessment has been made about the viability of rehabilitating those structures, or whether they're too far gone. I mean, we pick up today, like you said, we tore down 3 or 4 houses which had gone too far. I'd like to know how viable rehabilitation and preservation of neighborhoods of existing housing stock is in this program.
So we have all of those numbers. I don't have them off the top of my head, but we will dig in the next phase for the ones that have structures, what that level of rehab, the range is, because we won't be able to assess all of them. I think it's, if you remember,
Well, part of it is.
it's about 50 existing structures.
Part of the question revolves around cohesiveness of units and whether we have a collection of buildings that would constitute some sort of neighborhood revitalization effort, or whether we're going in and having to rebuild things. I mean, back in the 80s when we saw West End and Washington Park and West Salem and stuff, we had enough mass of architecture available to rehabilitate those neighborhoods in investment, and they came back more or less. I'm curious of what we're seeing now with the houses that we own, or even within the areas that may be outside of what we own, would be eligible for this kind of rehabilitation initiative, combined with what we own, combined with private sector investment.
We'll visualize that for you for the next
Thank you.
presentation.
Is that it? Thank you so much. And this meeting is adjourned. Councilman McIntosh, what time?
Give me